Hi, comic fans. This isn't actually the start of the episode yet. This is the preface, and I just want to talk briefly about why the episode took the form that it did, which is that of a sort of a free-form chat. It's more of a ramble than anything else, and it's because I happened to be out for coffee with a friend of mine. He is the best known for his Preacher covers, and covers he's done for Hellblazer and his great art on 2008's Slain. So my friend's name's Glenn Fabry, in case you hadn't guessed already. And we were talking about his time at Vertigo, and anyway, it came around to the current Vertigo relaunch that is happening under the new editor, Mark Doyle. I think he formerly worked under the Bat Books. So he has, a good reputation for working on solid titles. What is interesting about this relaunch, it's 25 years after the initial launch of the imprint under Karen Berger. I believe she was the editor at the time. So what's interesting is that it is pushing a very socially relevant message that's sort of built into the mandate from what I can see. Mark Doyle has said it's time to rebuild Vertigo. We're returning to our roots by spotlighting the most exciting new voices in comics, as well as bringing new voices to comics. So they've found these new voices in television, games, music, activism, podcasting, comics, etc., etc. I guess what interested me about this is that the comic books were so blatantly political. So, an example of that is Border Town by Eric M. Esquivel, and it's set in a Arizona border town, and it's got a lot of politics built right into it with sort of xenophobic undertones. Hex Wives is about witches who've had, it's sort of like a Stepford Wives. The witches have had their minds controlled by this patriarchal sort of force within their community. Goddess Mode is perhaps the most controversial title because the writer Zoe Quinn is directly linked to massive internet controversy from a couple of years ago called Gamergate, wherein the Gamergate community were fans and gamers who believed that ethics in journalism had been compromised by the likes of Quinn, who was a small league developer who had, well, as is reported, had sexual relations with various journalists in order to get good ratings for her output. Of course, Quinn's side of the story was that she was brutally harassed and victimized, and she came under attack by thousands of trolls on the internet, and she very much spun a narrative out of that painted her as the victim, whereas the Gamergate crowd obviously look at her as a bit of a villain. It's down to your own interpretation, I guess. But either way, the titles that are coming out of current Vertigo are very political. Definitely in comparison to what has gone before. That's not to say that, Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol or Animal Man weren't political, or that Hellblazer wasn't political. Swamp Thing. These were all very political titles, and they spun out of what was very much a punk rock narrative in the 1980s. A very fuck you to the man type attitude that was being manifest in definitely in British comics at the time, that made its way over into American comics. So my conversation with Glenn has come from my sort of desire to understand what it was like working in Vertigo during that period, during the 1980s. And I guess just we end up wandering off in different directions, but I guess it's just a conversation about comics then and comics in general now. So this is my first attempt at a free form. You'll have to forgive my constant and ahs. I'm very aware I'm doing that, and I am trying to limit it because listening back to myself can often be it's a difficult listen sometimes. You become very aware of your stuttering, so I am trying to limit that. But I hope you'll enjoy this brief chat I had with Glenn, and without further ado, here it is. Hi there, and welcome to Considering Comic Books. This would be episode 3, but instead of the usual written format where I read from an article that I've written, we're going to do this a little bit more freestyle. I have had feedback from people saying that they have found my previous stuff a little bit robotic because I'm reading it, but also because of my accent. I tend to have to enunciate so that people from an American audience or from the UK, so that they can actually understand.
Also, he's a robot.
so that they can understand what I'm saying. Who you've just heard there is Preacher comic book artist, cover artist Glenn Fabry. He's best known for his work on Preacher, but also on Slain. And we've got together to do a more free-form video where I'm going to talk about, we're going to have a talk about a few things that are going on in comics at the minute, and I'm going to get Glenn's opinion on them, and also a little bit of insight into what it was like whenever he worked in that particular sector of the industry. So let's just jump straight into it. I was going to talk about the Vertigo Comics announcement. There's been a little controversy over the relaunch because there's been it's been perceived to be quite a progressive lineup with titles like Border Town and Goddess Mode from Zoe Quinn, best known for her affiliation with the Gamergate controversy a few years back. So I wanted to talk to Glenn and see what he thought based on his time almost exclusively at Vertigo. How long ago was it?
It started in 1991. That's the first time I did anything for Vertigo.
Okay, and what did you start out doing with Vertigo? Was it Hellblazer?
Yeah, my first sort of work that was printed in America was for DC Vertigo Hellblazer. Yeah.
Okay, and that was Garth Ennis's run.
Yeah, he kind of campaigned for me to sort of have a go at it, really, because I'd worked for sort of Garth on some Fleetway magazines before. Like I did a painted comic strip short for him in Crisis, and also some bits and pieces in this sort of comic called Revolver. And apparently Garth had known about sort of my stuff for ages, from Slain in 2000 AD. In fact, the first thing he ever said to me was, "I used to read your stuff when I was little."
I think that's true of a lot of people. It's definitely the case.
Yeah, but I think it was 28. Beg pardon. I was 28, 29. I was kind of thinking, I'm not that old, am I? But,
well, Matt, you went into Vertigo, and presumably it was Karen Berger.
Yeah, Karen Berger. Yeah.
She was the editor at the time.
It was like Stuart Moore was the guy who was the editor of the comic, and I always gotten really well with Stuart whenever I meet him at sort of conventions up in London. But when Garth was doing his run on Hellblazer, there was a guy doing the covers for it. And this is before the days when people were using kind of computers to do illustrations. The guy doing the covers for his work on Hellblazer was some bloke who was like I can't remember his name, but his technique was he would be sort of basically doing the colours out of collage. He'd find newspapers and magazines and kind of rip them up and sort of stitch them together with
I remember those
stick or whatever. And sort of Garth wanted to sort of me to do them, and the people up at Vertigo weren't that keen on having me at all. But Garth kind of campaigned for them to give me a chance. So they said they'd give me one chance, and if they liked the first cover, then they might ask me to do some more. Sure. And so, given that opportunity, I really bust my tits actually on the first cover I did for them, trying to do the best job I possibly could. And it was actually pretty popular. So they sort of said, all right, you can do another one. So it goes after that. And then it got to the third cover that I did for them. And after that point, there was, they were happy enough with me.
So it was quite difficult for you to get in. In other words,
yeah, pretty much. I mean, Garth really had to campaign for it, and he was working with Will Simpson, Will Game of Thrones Simpson, as he's now known, as like a. So Will had known me from Fleetway for years and years as well.
Mm-hmm.
So both of those guys were kind of on my side.
Yeah, sure.
That helped out enormously.
I don't want to, I don't want to be seen as sort of leading the interview, but there is, or leading an agenda. I want to be seen as quite impartial here because there is a lot of controversy around the current Vertigo, especially from what's been deemed the Comicsgate crowd. These guys are, a movement of, they're claimed to be a fan movement, but there's obviously a lot of
gates.
Yeah, there's a lot of gates. Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of are they alt-right, or are they really bigots? And I think there's personally I've encountered, I think every movement has a fringe element of it that is one thing or the other, and I don't think any movement's pure. But anyway, there's this massive movement against what's going on in the mainstream comics, and they're claiming that progressive values have infested the current comic book companies, and that's what we're, I guess, talking about to some extent. It is these people who haven't necessarily worked in comics before, people with very progressive neoliberal values that are now working for the new Vertigo under the relaunch. So I guess what I'm asking is that what was it like in Vertigo when you worked there? Was it similar progressive values, or was it something else?
No, I think as far as I could tell, most of the original stuff from Vertigo had what they were calling at the time the British invasion.
Yeah, yeah.
So they'd go over to London comic strip conventions, and they picked up Alan Moore to do Swamp Thing, and they ended up with Jamie Delgado and Garth, another one of the British invasion.
Grant Morrison and
Grant Morrison,
young Mark Millar. He went.
Yes. I've met all these people. That's what Dave Gibbons,
Dave Gibbons, okay.
And Brian Bolden.
So it was considered, all these guys came from 2000 AD, which was it was considered a renegade comic book during the late 70s, early 80s.
No, the idea behind it was it's the thing that everybody was unemployed bought it. Because it was only 22p. It was printed on bog paper, essentially. And
it was a working class comic book, wasn't it?
Very, very much. I mean, if you had sort of no money or no money cubed, you could just about afford a copy of 2000 AD to keep you entertained for 20 minutes while you read it.
Oh, absolutely. So you had all this great talent that were involved in 2000 AD, and Karen Berger, as is famously retold in the Future Shock 2000 AD documentary, she came over and they had these meetings and all this 2000 AD talent pitch stuff.
I think the reason why I kind of fell down at that juncture was that I'll try and make this less involved than it should be, because you've got a little bit of amount of time available. But my dad always used to say to me, there's no such thing as a free meal or a free drink. And I go along to these conventions and people would just buy me loads and loads of free drinks. And I never turned them down. So I think one of the problems they had with me at Vertigo was that the only people from the editorial lot had ever seen me at all in person. I was always drunk. So I think that was one of the reasons why Garth had to
lobby for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's fair enough, I guess, Glenn. We're aware of your fondness for a shandy, but or 10. But I mean, I guess what's interesting here is that there was always politics in comics, definitely in 2000 AD, but there's now it's almost like a movement against any sort of political content in comics. And Vertigo to me struck me as at least in a subversive way, quite political. What about this modern trend to be very blatantly political in comics? Especially in Vertigo with the hiring of Zoe Quinn and her past affiliations. This strikes me as quite a political move, but
I can't really sort of comment on it with any degree of sort of knowledge. I mean, I used to be on this thing called the DC Comps list.
Oh yeah, sure.
Which is when everything that came out from DC that month, you'd end up with a box of it. Coming in through your front door, so you could then look through it and see what was going on.
Okay.
But I haven't been on the comps list for, 3 years, something like that. Right. So I don't know of these people.
It's outside your wheelhouse now.
It is.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of interesting because there's, like I say,
I think the politics that were involved in comics at the time I was working for them, I would say would be sort of left or centre.
Left or centre, yeah.
Just it was kind of trendy at the time as well. You had British comedians were kind of left of centre. Anybody involved in the arts, like the actors and the directors and the opera singers, everybody was like sort of slightly left of centre.
Mm-hmm. Whereas, I guess what interests me at the moment is, have we moved from left of centre to
centre?
A bit, I'm not even sure. I think the arts have, let's just say liberalism has always found a home in the culture and in the arts and in the entertainment, and so you have to wonder to what extent now is there no sort of middle to conservative influence in these comic books anymore. And I'm trying to look at it objectively. I know that there's a massive movement, who are saying, oh, we need to get these crazy far left activists out of our comic books. But, trying to be objective about it, I'm trying to discover just to what extent is there an actual infestation? Is this internet hysteria? And I guess one of the ways is to, talk to guys like you and get an insight into
you can get an insight from me from was what it was like to sort of work in comics. That's all back in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah. Well, that's perfect.
Stuff I'm doing at the moment. I haven't noticed any sort of specific political bias one way or the other. Just like politically speaking myself, I'm proud to say that I'm a wishy-washy liberal.
Yes, I too am a liberal.
I'm wishy-washy though.
Well,
if you say you're more wishy-washy than me, I'll punch your face.
What do you mean by wishy-washy, though? What does that mean?
Oh, it means it's like the world that we live in is sort of really quite tough. And now that I'm older and all this kind of stuff, and I've got a couple of children, a couple of adults now, young adults, you do like sort of look a little bit more into sort of what's going on around the world. And, half the time I'm kind of thinking, how can I protect them? It's that kind of rubbish.
Yeah. No, I get you.
It might be paranoia, but,
I don't think I'm a wishy-washy liberal per se. I think I'm more of a centre-left.
You're a hard-hitting, dynamic liberal.
No, I think my liberalism has to come from a place of reasoned...
political debate.
Yeah, political debate. I have to... that's where my liberalism comes from. So, it's with these reactionary movements happening online, I wonder how much of it is, as I've mentioned, how much of it is hysteria, how much of it is just people wanting to attach themselves to specific sort of tribalistic online entities, and these things manifest. And sometimes I look at what's going on in comics at the moment, and it's like there's an angry fan base outside who want to pull things down because they don't want anyone else to have it, and there's an angry there's an angry group on the inside who want to tear things down because they don't want these guys on the outside to have it. So it's you wonder how much of a demographic is this, whether it's all just been blown up to ridiculous proportions. And
I don't know. It's sort of difficult to sort of say, really, but quite a lot of the time, people will go on the internet and just sort of say something outrageous, and they get a response. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's we live in an era where it's very easy to go online and say ridiculous things. Although conversely, we now live in an era where, for all your anonymity, for all the anonymous trolls or things like that, guys who can go out and attack people, if you actually say something as a public figure, you can very quickly be, chastised and disposed of if what you've said is too
reading in the
controversial.
papers these days, you get the general impression that it's. I mean, nobody's anonymous anymore if they're using any of the social media, are they? Because I thought that Facebook have got, sort of every single person who ever used it, and they've been sort of looking into them to find out ways to put adverts on their Facebook to.
With Facebook, there's you have to comply with their sign-up procedure. You can't be a fake person. I think they root you out. And whereas with Twitter.
When you say sort of fake person, do you mean an actually made-up person?
Oh yeah, a made-up person,
rather than a made-up personality.
Yeah, so it's I think it's the same with, or it's not the same with Twitter. I should say you can create an anonymous account and you can go onto creators' profiles and attack them, or vice versa. Anyone can create an account. So
Dr. Jekyll could be on Twitter, but so could Mr. Hyde. Maybe the same guy.
Exactly. So it's hard to know what you're dealing with there, but it's a very interesting time that we live in, where like I say, I wanted to talk to you about what it was like in Vertigo during your time period, especially in the wake of what's being deemed it's a massive controversy with these new writers and artists, and this sort of politicized message that they want to put out under the new editorial mandate. So so I just it's interesting to hear your version of things about how you found Vertigo at the time. Everyone was kind of left of centre, and it was quite a liberal environment.
Sort of Karen Berger and Shelley Bond, who were kind of running a lot of it. They were actually like kind of Anglophile. They were big sort of fans of the Rolling Stones and punk rock.
Oh yeah,
and,
sure.
Youth movement and all of this kind of stuff, and maybe like the English accent or something. I don't know. They were big on it.
So that was partially the reason. It's funny because nowadays it seems to be. It seems to be the big thing to sort of go outside of the norm, regards recruiting, but not so much. It's not so much Anglophiles who are English writers, I guess, and artists who are in vogue, as much as it is political attitudes. So maybe it's what your politics are, how you identify, that whole identity politics thing. Maybe it's a different. They're looking for a different perspective. It's just that instead of looking at a specific country, they're looking at somebody who's maybe from the transgender community, or who's from the LGBTQ plus community. They're looking at these people because they want a fresh perspective. So maybe that's what it is now, and maybe that's.
I don't know so much about the LBGT.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't know.
What I did notice though was that. There was a point, well, there still is. I think the most people who buy monthly comics these days, when I first started working in comics, it was 97% men or young men were buying the comics, and the only women you'd see at the conventions would be their girlfriends, or somebody that they had to drag along, God, let's get it over with, sort of thing. Poor people. And then now it's got to the point where, as far as the floppies are concerned, the monthlies.
Yes.
50% of the audience is female.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So sort of back, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, because everybody in sort of comics is commercial art in it, so they're looking for a way to make money out of it.
Yeah, sure.
Having found the new reader dynamic, what these people would do would be, I know, let's make some of our female characters lesbian. That way we'll bring the women in. Something like that. But the people who were writing it were middle-aged men. You know, who wanted to write about lesbians anyway. I mean, he could hardly stop them. So at least these days they're attempting to sort of hire somebody with a little bit more. I mean, I'm not saying that all of these new people are lesbians or whatever, or, you know, but it's got to be a bit better than middle-aged men writing about women just so they can have pictures of Batgirl kissing Super Croc or whatever.
I sort of agree with that. What I'm my thing is, I'm all about.
Well, Thor is now a woman.
Oh no, he's back to being a man.
Is he
He's
now?
a man now.
Oh, okay.
I don't know the whole plot, but I think for me it's not so much about middle-aged men writing progressive characters. It's about good writers writing progressive characters, and one of my favorite examples. He's from the gay community. He's a guy called Steve Orlando, and he wrote an arc on the Midnighter. And Midnighter's a gay character. Steve Orlando.
I worked on the Midnight.
Yeah, you did. Yeah,
I did sort of Authority Kev with some of my best work actually. Authority Kev with Garth Ennis, and there was also one which he sort of. Like a sort of one-off issue for the Midnighter, where him and Apollo, it's just like obviously like earlier incarnations of them. So it was like a Golden Harvest issue.
Okay.
So basically with them as samurai.
Okay. Yeah, I
fighting
think I missed
in
that.
prehistorical Japan. Well, not prehistorical, but.
Well, yeah. What I mean, I guess, is that Garth Ennis did a great job writing those characters, but he was a straight white guy. For me, it's about the merit. Now, if you want to get a writer who is a fantastic writer like Steve Orlando, who's also gay, and put him on a gay character, then that's fantastic. He, as proved by his Midnighter run and his Midnighter and Apollo, he's a really good writer.
Right.
But
I'll have to have a look at them.
Worth a look. But I guess what gets me is whenever you have someone who's given a title and they aren't necessarily, it's not necessarily about their skill. It's about whether they're a good fit for the character. So I've heard, people talk about casting writers for the character, and I think for me it's all about I'll give you an example. It's like whenever I read the Anne Rice vampire novels, I never thought to myself, Anne Rice isn't an androgynous white vampire. She has no right to write these characters.
No, I would actually sort of say that she doesn't have any right. It should be an androgynous white character who is 700 years old. That's the only way you can write with any kind of conviction.
Well, no, I mean, I think, if you're a good writer, you should be able to operate outside of your particular race, gender, whatever.
Yeah.
And you should be able to do that. So yeah, I mean, middle-aged white guys writing lesbianic characters, yeah, it would be
as long as it's well written.
As long as it's well written, yeah, that's the point we're trying to make. It has to be good. I think it's good that it's obviously a good move to get people who are more in tune with those sort of characters in, but they have to be good writers. It has to be, it can't just be, oh, you're a lesbian, well, we'll put you in to write this lesbian character. That there's no merit involved there. It's just a casting call, and I think what readers definitely want to see is really well written characters, and they don't care so much about the what the race, gender, sexuality of the writer is, as long as the character on the page is being well written and well, given a good representation.
Well, no, I agree completely.
Yeah. So yeah, very interesting. But I guess
it's tough enough doing a comic book anyway, because you've got the writer, or generally, you have the writer, you have the artist, you have the editor, you have the colourist, you have the letterer, you have editor-in-chief and all this kind of stuff. So, despite the fact that it generally comes across as just like, sort of words and pictures, it does have a tendency to get a little bit more involved in order to get the thing on the shelves in the first place.
Yeah, big time. Well, I guess this is all the time we have for today, but we shall do this again, Glenn. Maybe we'll catch up and have another chat in the future and talk about something new. This has been very informal, literally spanned out of...
Not informative, informal.
Literally spanned out of a coffee we were having today, and we decided I said, why don't we put a little episode up and talk about something contemporary. But yeah, listen...
Which I don't know anything about, by the way.
Yeah, we quickly established that I was asking the wrong guy.
Yep.
But this has been fun, and let's definitely do it again. I hope you listeners, have enjoyed this, and any feedback that you would like to give about our rambling conversation that had a lot of ups and downs, and I don't know whether it specifically answered any questions, but we did give it a go. Any feedback that you would like to give?
Thank you.
Yeah. Any feedback you would like to give, please leave us some in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time for the next episode of Considering Comic Books. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching the video, and if you enjoyed it, please comment below. I'd love to hear from you. You can follow me at Consider Comics on Twitter, and that's Consider_Comics, and you can check out my own work with my artistic collaborator, very talented Ryan Brown, over at his website, ryanbrownart.com, where the first part of our free online webcomic, Esther the Relique, is available for free. Please enjoy, and if you like it or hate it and you've got any criticism or feedback, we would love to hear from you.